Macross Plus is a story that delves deep into the abyss of loss and repression. It paints a universe through the shadows of unbridled fatalism. In Macross Plus, we're reminded that sometimes, in the fleeting dance that is life, in these very moments, the act of living pales in comparison to the profound intensity of truly feeling alive. So it's been nearly 30 years since the release of Macross Plus, and today I'm here to answer the question, does it still hold up? So I usually don't do this, but I kind of want to set the stage and tell you kind of a little bit about who I am, because that'll inform kind of how you can perceive my opinion. And, if you want to kind of shoot down my opinion after that, that's completely valid. I'm not a movie critic. I'm not anything. What I am is an artist who's a retired special operations veteran with over 23 years in service, over 10 tours to other places in the world. And I'm also a co-founder of a data analytics firm, and I'm starting let's just call it a media studio right now. So that's really where I'm at. And if you want, come along for the ride, because I'm going to go ahead and talk about this movie. By the way, if I didn't say it before, spoilers for a 30-year-old movie. All right, let's start out with the writer, Shoji Kawamori. He did, obviously, Do You Remember Love? And also Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, which is the entire series. That said, Macross 2 wasn't his abomination. And so in 1995, he takes the reins back and makes a movie called Macross Plus, which was originally, again, OVA. When I was a kid, I was able to watch the movie, which was a VHS tape at the time, and I had no idea that the OVA existed. There are differences, but I'm not going to talk about them here today. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the anime art style here, and this was kind of carte blanche, the go-to anime art style in the 90s for your kind of generic Fatal Furies, your Street Fighters, things that didn't have a specific kind of, anime art style already. Of course, there was still your kind of Dragon Ball Z and your Bleach, which was emerging, and all these other ones. So I'm not saying that this was the only art style, but when it comes to studios who were doing like movies and kind of other things like that, this was pretty standard. So I'm really biased here, but this is one of my favorite anime art styles. It had a touch of reality, proportions were still on point, and things weren't overly exaggerated, e.g., body parts. And given that, I think there was a subtle kind of awesomeness to this art style where there's like really weight in the characters and weight in the environments in which the characters have to interact. And obviously this is a personal preference because it was the art style that I saw in my teens, and obviously it was the thing that I saw in my formative years. So obviously biased, but I love this art and I love this art style. So the first opening shot immediately shows us our three heroes. And the thing that I noticed first about this, because it's so not anime right now, is that these characters are probably 16, 17, or 18. And in regular shonen anime right now, that is way past your peak, way past your prime. I mean, outside of characters like Gojo and Urahime, we have not a lot of representation when it comes to characters that are gonna age out. So the story starts out about 7 years later, and so I'm gonna say that they're 25 because that makes sense to me. If you're 18 years old, you graduated high school, you've had your career, and they say 7 years later, I'm gonna go with 25. But the cool thing about that is in the 90s, that was pretty much where anime was. A lot of the characters were in their young 20s. See, nowadays I think that, anime skews super young when it comes to the characters in general. You see a lot of characters that are just in high school, and the plot arcs and the plot points don't even involve high school, and there's no kind of balancing or managing of high school, so I don't even know why they're using high school characters. These characters genuinely act like adults and do adult things, so to me, again, I don't know why that makes sense, but I think aesthetically, Japanese anime kind of skews towards that in the modern times. The one thing that I will say is I think I have a little bit of a blind spot when it comes to a decade of anime, and I want to say that's like in the 2010s. And the reason I think for that is because I think what happened was anime really didn't grow with us at that time. It was like kind of given to the generation behind us. So I'm not going to get into Japanese demography, but I do know that they skew old right now, and they actually have a problem with not having enough young people. Just not enough people are having babies, essentially. My point is I don't think it's demographics in this case. I just think that I don't know, Japanese like that younger anime vibe to some extent, and I don't know why that is. I guess the only point I'm really making is I think there's a demographic skew, at least in America, where obviously our generation, my generation, took the reins of the superhero characters, and you get Avengers Endgame, you get Batman Begins with Christopher Nolan. All those things and all those themes get unpacked because our generation finally gets a chance to make movies. And it doesn't feel like that ever happened in Japan. And I have no idea why, and it's beyond the scope of this video. So let's get back to Macross Plus. Anyways, our main character is essentially Isamu Dyson, which is kind of like a hothead / rebel. And I've seen kind of other YouTubers comment that this guy's kind of a jerk, this, that, the other. But you know, after living a pretty full life and, you know, 23 plus years in the military, I will say that there's definitely a time, place, and a serious pragmatic reason to have this kind of personality type, specifically when it's in a field where you have to have a bunch of A-type personalities. I'm not going to say much more than that because you're either going to understand what I'm saying or you're just going to have to live a little bit more to find out. So some quick commentary on the jets. So this is the YF-19, and this is the real-life YF-22. And this is the YF-21, and this is the real-life YF-23. I see some similarities, which are great. I think there should be some basis in reality. And so this is obviously grounded in a ton of reality. I guess the author went out to Edwards Air Force Base and actually took a bunch of notes and watched a bunch of their sorties. Also, obviously, General Dynamics and General Galaxy. I don't know if that was just translation or whatever, but still, it feels really grounded because of those themes. Oh, by the way, in terms of like military structure, R&D, and all those elements, the author definitely did his due diligence. There's obviously a bunch of parts where you have to suspend disbelief and just kind of go with the story. But, you know, outside of those kind of key moments, you know, the setup itself and the world that he kind of built leads to some pretty dramatic stakes because of the world that he built and the research that he did for the writing of this movie. So with any good Macross saga, there's always some kind of love triangle. And this love triangle is between two guys and this woman right here, Myun. The thing is, back in the day, I really didn't understand some of the nuance when it came to just conversational body language or what the author was trying to suggest, because I just didn't even understand that girls and guys were that much different psychologically. But when we take a look and unpack all this, it becomes so obvious to me as an adult what the author is trying to say here, or the story he's trying to tell. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about Sharon Apple and that whole character. So every scene she's in is definitely an epilepsy warning waiting to happen here. And, you know, when I was a kid, I kind of dismissed a lot of that, and I just thought maybe I just don't understand it, I'm not coming from the right place or whatever like that. I just didn't know what I didn't know. As an adult, a lot of these scenes that I've watched in old anime like this have become very transparent as I become an adult, as I understand systems and strategic intent and all these other things. But I will say, as a co-founder of a data analytics firm and somebody who's worked with machine learning and integrated AI and AI solutions into strategy and real life operations, not just theory, I just want to say that none of this rings true still to me. And it's not because it's not plausible, or it's not because that Sharon's not a good character. I just don't feel like it hits home for me, but I do understand it. Sharon Apple is more of a psychological exploration, I think, than kind of the artificial intelligence exploration. So the first thing I want to unpack here is, you know, Sharon is missing that emotional kind of matrix, that emotional algorithm, which I guess currently exists in this universe, but it's kind of psychopathy leads it to self-preservation, so they don't use it. But one of the things that I want to talk about is, you know, Kasparov versus Deep Blue. And if you don't know what that is, it was like the chess grandmaster, Garry Kasparov, in 1996, this is after the movie, loses to Deep Blue the second time around. And when he loses, a lot of the things that come out of that is, hey, this doesn't seem right, especially based on the architecture of how AI or even chess machines think nowadays and compute, that there was probably somebody else behind the curtain drawing kind of strings when it comes to some of the blind spots that computers would have. And again, this was before that, but I do think that it's pretty kind of omniscient here when it comes to like thinking about and theory crafting what could happen when it comes to AI in the future. So one thing that I think was funny is I watched this with my 18-year-old son, and, you know, in his words, this AI is the best wingman/woman ever. And it's essentially the byproduct of Myun really not being able to express her feelings and closing out her emotions. And I think that's why I say Sharon Apple as an AI is not so much an exploration on AI, but more so an exploration in psychology. And Maslow's hierarchy be damned, this is not just self-actualization in theory. This is self-actualization in a physical manifestation of a person that actually splits into two, Sharon Apple, one that loves him and one that loves the other guy. And it's a mess, but I think it's meant to be messy. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, as like it's a mess, it's messy, but I enjoyed it. And I think that's kind of a really cute way to have the author literally explain it to somebody without a moment like this.
Sensors show chronometric particles emanating from the sphere.
They're creating a temporal vortex.
Time travel.
So yeah, I think it's just a different way to do that, is what I'm saying. So as we kind of go through the whole story, one of the things that happens near the end here is the whole project doesn't get shut down because it's too big to get shut down. But then we do find out that it's kind of a throwaway project anyways, which is kind of interesting to me. But the one thing I will say is there's a ton of self-preserving institutions that when they get to a certain scale or a certain point in their kind of journey or whatever like that, in terms of R&D or as a function, they still kind of play through it or play it out. And, you know, as a kid, I wouldn't fully understand that or why these people are kind of going back and forth and playing politics on something so benign. But, you know, as I get older, this is actually really standard fare. So, you know, props to the author for kind of showcasing that and just making me really frustrated as a 16-year-old boy. So here's a scene that I really want to talk about. So Isamu actually believes in her here, and how this plays out is kind of interesting because, you know, if you think about the whole theory of like Isamu's a jerk thing, you don't really feel this and you don't really understand like where he's coming from. When he's doing these things or doing the things that he's doing here, and when he tells her this specifically,
I accepted that I couldn't make a living out of only doing what was fun.
No, Mune. You shouldn't think like
Wrong.
that.
You just sold out.
this is him believing in her. This is him telling her not to give up. Whereas if you think about what Bowman's doing, he's coddling her. He's not letting her live her life. He's not giving her actually what she needs. He's just trying to be there, kind of in a selfish way. Dyson here, or Samu, just runs off and gives her space because that's what she needs right now. And for what it's worth, I think this metaphorical scene here where he's literally a dark shadow looming over her is very powerful. And if you ask me, this is the turning point of the entire movie where we actually see the characters resolve a lot of things. There's actually a ton of catharsis here between the conversations that they should have had in their youth and the things that are coming out now. So I think this is a real special kind of poignant moment for me, where I think as a kid, this was kind of throwaway, and I'm like, let's get back to the Jets and tell me about this love story. This is not progressing. This actually progresses it a lot. This piece and this actual scene right here is super useful to understanding Isamu versus Dyson and who those two characters actually are, and specifically who they actually are when they interact with Mune. So in the end, we find out that the R&D shenanigans is just throwaway because there's an AI-controlled X9 that is now in production and it's ready to go. The thing about this is, here's the point where you have to suspend disbelief and just hit the fun button, because if you don't, none of this makes sense and is not nearly as grounded as the beginning of the anime. So that said, buckle up and I'll talk to you about kind of what I thought going forward here, but honestly, it's not too much. It's literally just turn off your brain, popcorn movie time. So I already touched on this, but here's where we get to see Sharon and her kind of two self-actualizations. And, these are manifestations of Mune per se. And again, like this is them trying to tell us specifically, hey, these are her thoughts and emotions that she can't self-actualize because she has repressed them so deeply along with her singing. And I think that's kind of valuable too, to use the song and the singing and then bring the song out at the end. And we do know that Macross song and protoculture is super important to the franchise, to the series, and to how we interact with the world. In fact, song wins that war in Macross, Do You Remember Love? So given that and understanding that makes this a lot more powerful if you think about it. So I really want to talk about Sharon giving him the ultimate joy, but she kind of spells it out, so I don't have to talk about it. I forgot that she did spell it out, but at the beginning I was like, why is he trying to kill him though? The thing is, when I was 16, that I seriously thought that was some serious psycho stuff. But in adulthood, I definitely understand the 1+1 logic here. It's literally like point between life and death. It's what she thinks he's seeking, and that's what she thinks that Myun wants for him. And so she gives him that joy. The problem is she sees that in all these other people too, so she puts these other people through kind of weird spaces and places to kind of get to her end goal, which is being with Isamu, or probably not even being with Isamu, but being pretty fatalistic as Myun and Isamu both are, and actually saying, hey, it doesn't even matter here. All I want to do is make him happy. And likewise, Isamu, as fatalistic as he is, always says to himself, I'd rather die than not live or feel alive. And so he steals the jet and blows up Earth. You know, it's kind of crazy, but again, this is where you have to suspend disbelief or they're going to jail forever, which is fine. Oh, by the way, side note, don't watch the HD version. I scrubbed through it, and this is my personal opinion, but as an artist, there's some kind of style choices and some lines that get recreated here that don't ring true and kind of detract from the whole overall art style. And I also think that there's this weird hazy look from the 90s and from VHS where lines weren't perfectly sharp, and that actually helps this series along a lot. It lets you kind of imagine what those blank spaces might be. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but again, that's a personal preference, but I'd rather watch the old VHS version here. In the end, I think I gotta say that I really enjoyed Macross Plus again. And is it a perfect movie? No, but I think it's a good, solid movie, and I think what it really does, at least for the author in this case, is get to say things that he wanted to say in the Macross saga that he wasn't able to do. And based on that, I think we see a lot more mature themes here, especially if we juxtapose the Macross saga to this. So if you recently just watched the Macross Plus saga, then let me know if you saw some of the things that I saw. And if not, let me know what you saw. And if this is bringing back a bunch of memories and you want to go watch it, definitely go watch it because I think it's worth your time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.